Thank you for joining me here today, Natalia.
Thanks for having me, Tobias.
So, I wanted to talk with you today because you have some experience from the Biden administration. And then, separately, after you stopped working in the government, you started to develop an interest in AI. So, what I would like to learn from you is what exactly did you do at the Biden employment? And secondly, how did your interest start in AI?
Sure. Thanks for asking me those questions. So in the Biden administration, I worked at the State Department for all 4 years. I had two roles. My first role was in the Office of Policy Planning, which is basically like the Secretary of State's personal consultancy, or think tank. So the idea is that you're able to advise on more medium to long-term issues, and you don't have to necessarily react to policy as it comes. So you can be a little bit, you can take a step back, you can think of alternative viewpoints, you can bring in counter perspectives, blind spots, and so on. So that was where I worked at for the first 2 years. And then after that, they opened a new office called the Subnational Diplomacy Unit, which was part of this broader strategy that the Biden administration had of foreign policy for the middle class, which meant that foreign policy and domestic policy could not be seen as two separate entities. They needed to feed off of each other and benefit each other. And the idea of the Subnational Diplomacy Unit in the State Department in particular was to serve as a broker, as a channel, as a resource at the State Department for state and local leaders in the US who wanted to engage internationally. And many of them already engage internationally on their own. They have trade agreements, they have sister cities, they have, for instance, educational exchanges, and so many more different ways. And what we were able to do was be the front door at the State Department for them. So instead of having to find who at the State Department could help them, they could go through us and we could put them in touch with the experts that could help advise them on the specific issues that they had questions about. And so those were my 4 years there. So it was 2 years in each, basically. And before that, I had a career mainly in research. I say I was a serial think tanker. I spent a lot of time in different think tanks. I would write, publish a lot. My background is mainly on issues related to China. I also lived in Beijing for 4 years, and also the Western Hemisphere, Latin America. So that's that's kind of in a nutshell where I came from. Now, in terms of my AI interests, there are a lot of different places that it comes from, but I think the main one is more of my origin than anything. But since I was little, I've always been interested in technology, and I grew up in the 90s when home computers were a whole new thing and the internet was new. And I really spent a lot of time. I was a very early adopter of technology and the internet. It was always something that I found very interested and was enthused by. In college, I kind of studied that further. I did major in political science, so very aligned with my government and international affairs types of roles. But I also studied film and media studies, and part of it was due to my interest in the internet and how we use it to express ourselves, and the technologies behind that, and the history behind it, and so on. And I didn't necessarily follow the more like tech or media side directly in my career. It pops up like indirectly through my different roles and through the different topics. For instance, if you cover anything China related, tech is going to pop up. But what I saw with AI, especially with the the commercialization of LLMs in the past 3 years with ChatGPT and all the other models, was kind of a time that reminded me of when I was young and the internet was young too. And that is a time that, on the one hand, is very exciting because there's all these new things that are coming up. There's all these possibilities of what this could mean. But also having grown up and seen the evolution of the internet, it's a double-edged sword. So I think coming into it also this round, with some curiosity and some, optimism for potential, but also a good amount of skepticism and really trying to parse through the noise of what this actually means and what's real about it. And so after the Biden administration ended, I knew for a while when my end date would be, which would be in late January this year. So I decided that I would, even long before that happened, I decided that I would take some time off to explore different interests and do different things. And because I had this kind of nascent interest in AI that also aligned with a more long-term interest in technology, I decided to take it head on, one by just experimenting more and learning a little bit more how to code and just learning through doing, but also by kind of starting a newsletter. And I started the newsletter expecting it to be much more informal and less substantive than it had been. So the newsletter's on Substack. It's called Artificial Inquiry. And originally, I just thought it would be kind of a place for me to share my experiments with AI, as a lot of people have been. But then over time, as I experimented more and just read more about it and learned more about AI, I started to have a lot of my own views. So what originally was going to be something of me kind of showcasing experiments and maybe having like listicles and not really delving much deeper than that, turned into more of a little bit more substantive and more of like an exploration of what AI's usage and everything it means in society, and how should we think about it when we are implementing it and its different applications, whether that is in government or just in life. So those are kind of different issues I've been exploring.
Cool. Thanks for that explanation. And in the last, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 years, so much has happened in AI. What are you most excited about if we think about the use of AI in the government?
So, I mean, I think in government in particular, there are a lot of inefficiencies. Part of it is just the logic of large bureaucracies, and not all of that is necessarily bad. Like, there is a reason why there's so much redundance, why there's so much paperwork, and a lot of it is to have checks and balances. But on the other hand, that prevents a lot of change and a lot of innovation. And we do have structures that are very old in this country that they were created with a certain logic that maybe don't always um, align with what society is like today and how we've evolved. So I do see potential in making a lot of the bureaucratic processes much faster. And I know that there is experimentation, those things, but like with any AI implementation, a lot of it is about the details and the training and the localization. Um, so you can't just throw like chat GPT at something and hope it'll fix it. That is especially for very complex issues that are the issues that government tends to deal with. So yeah, I would say just in general, kind of the optimization of bureaucracy would be the main the main thing. And just if that can take out time that people end up spending in meetings or writing paperwork, that gives people more time to actually be responsive to constituents. So it can be better for democracy if you have a better functioning system. But of course, again, it depends on the details of the implementation.
And let's say the anti-bureaucratic approach using AI in that regard is definitely what the Trump administration right now is doing. There's a lot of focus on using AI first, experimenting a lot, trying different things out. There's not a lot of focus on risk like in Europe, where we are more afraid of the technology, to be honest with you. The Trump administration is in the complete opposite camp. Can you understand where that approach comes from? That the American AI action plan is taken, for instance.
Yeah, so I guess there are a few kind of different things at play. So one is the White House AI Action Plan, and two is more so this administration's general take on AI and incorporation throughout government, such as through the Department of Government Efficiency. There's a lot of usage of AI in making decisions for the Department of Government Efficiency, and also through the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, and other more top-down initiatives, there has been a bigger push on AI usage. That is not 100% new. There already started to be, like experimentations with AI that have been going on for a while. I was a beta tester for basically an LLM that would have, that is internal to the State Department. So there were already kind of initiatives like that, but my sense, and also with the caveat that I have not been in government since January, is that there's an even bigger push for that since then, and more of an acceleration of adoption. So I think that has a lot of different, like influences on why that is exactly. Part of it is ideological. Again, the kind of idea of like efficiency, and we need to like cut a lot of, the fat out, and then AI is going to optimize everything. It is it is kind of following the logic of move fast and break things that we see a lot in Silicon Valley. And I mean, that also follows that a lot of people from Silicon Valley have, a lot of influence in this administration. So part of it is that sort of ideology. And part of it, it's like a real recognition that these are systems that maybe are not the most efficient. That said, it like making them effective and actual implementation in a way that will actually lead to more efficient systems, um, is it really depends on the details. And my sense is that a lot of the way that AI has been incorporated into federal government lately has led to a lot of mishaps that don't actually make government more efficient, and actually lead to more losses. So, and we can delve into some examples related to that. Now, in terms of where the AI action plan um, goes, so that's kind of the more of like how are government resources being reorganized to support AI's development in the US, right? So the biggest thing that I would say, the biggest thing of note from this AI action plan is through basically deregulation or just non-regulation, and just letting AI companies go as fast and loose as possible to develop as much AI as fast as possible. So that is kind of an indirect way of reorganizing government, which makes sense with the idea that they like gutted a lot of government. But on the other hand, there are some ways in which this AI action plan does not necessarily align with the reallocation of resources that they have done. So, for instance, a big part of the AI action plan, the whole third pillar, which was on national security and competition with China, it's very it's very contradictory with what you're seeing on the ground with the types of resources that are being taken away from the State Department, for instance, and from all these other agencies. I mean, USAID, for instance, would have been a potential ally in promoting US technology in a lot of different ways, finding use cases for it in development. There are a lot of potential use cases of AI in development that could have been an opportunity in that sense, but USAID doesn't exist anymore. really. I mean, it kind of exists in name only, but it doesn't it doesn't really exist. So it's a lot of these resources are no longer there. And then there was no mention of migration in the whole plan, which is pretty contradictory because the strongest AI developers in the US, most of them weren't born here. And the strongest AI developers in the world have not really been born in the US for a while. And that with the general defunding of the sciences and a lot of people who work in sciences not feeling as welcome in the US anymore, you're doing a lot of things that are counterproductive to what the goal is. If the goal is really to maximize the potential of US AI development. So yeah, there are these kind of two, I mean, these like two sides of the like AI implementation, the connection between like AI development and government, but we're seeing that they're very contradictory in a number of ways.
AI is becoming more and more political, right? Also, what you said about the migration policies of the Trump administration. There's so many people from China living in the US who are, excelling in AI engineering, and they are perhaps not feeling as welcome as they used to. So I see your point. It's also something, obviously, that there's been a lot of media coverage about. Let's say that just hypothetically that there was a Democratic administration right now. Let's say it was Kamala Harris or Joe Biden running as president. How different do you think, based on your experience, they would treat AI as technology and also the policy surrounding AI?
Sure. So, I mean, if we look at the White House AI action plan compared to the Biden like AI policy, the Biden policy really prioritized responsible AI, and there was a lot more of a focus on mitigating AI's risks, biases, societal harms. Um, it was much more regulated, and there was there was less of a sense that I mean, there was still, I mean, support for, I mean, this industry in itself is already going very fast, so that was already happening, but there was less of an emphasis in accelerating that. There was also more of an emphasis on issues on like the cost of AI on issues like climate change, um, and and yeah, but that said, um a lot of these risk mitigation mechanisms such as the NIST and other general like risk and ethical frameworks that the Biden administration promoted, they were still imperfect. They were still relatively weak and hard to implement and hold people accountable, but it's still better to have them there than to not have them, because once you remove them, then there's even like zero, there's not even something you can build off of in order to hold accountability or like create more dialogue surrounding these issues. Um, the other big thing is that this administration has really focused on getting rid of woke AI, which I find kind of ironic, because the idea of getting rid of woke AI, in the words of this administration, is to make AI less biased and more neutral by removing issues such as misinformation, diversity, equity, inclusion, and climate change. Um, the kind of contradiction, well, one is just removing reference to misinformation, but you want something that is more neutral already just from the get-go is contradictory. Because if you want something that is more like accurate and neutral, it needs to be able to say what is and isn't misinformation. If you're starting from the point that that's not something you can discuss, then you're already not you're not actually working in like a place of neutrality. Um, and then just the removal of certain issues and like the I think there's a politicization of a lot of issues that are not necessarily or shouldn't really be political, but they've been politicized, and then the idea is to actually remove these from AI. And what there are several effects of this. One, it actually does not make the AI neutral, which is obvious. There is like an ideological push towards all of this, and there's an intent to shape AI in a way that can more broadly shape information and shape the way that people think, especially since most people who use AI tend to use it as a search engine, and they might not necessarily question AI as much as maybe they should, because it already hallucinates, and it's a great technology and very impressive in a lot of ways, but it is still limited and it's still flawed. But and there are even studies that sometimes people will trust what an AI says more than a person. No matter what the content of that is, the content could be exactly the same. So that's very dangerous, because if you're having an AI that actually ends up being more biased, you are influencing people and sharing misinformation, especially since this one is, you know, preventing from actually noting what is and isn't misinformation. And the other thing is, which is a more indirect push, is by having this anti-woke AI policy and practice, it is also another way of pressuring the private companies to remove this woke AI. So it's not even something that might be within the government, but the effect is of a sort of backdoor influence on AI platforms writ large. And that creates this cascading effect of, anti-wokeness that in practice just means anti what this administration doesn't like and doesn't agree with. And we saw we've seen some examples of what that can look like in a lot of the very public issues with Grok and Elon Musk. So, for instance, Grok claiming certain things that are factual, but that Elon Musk did not agree with, and then pushing his engineers to change Grok's responses, and sometimes Grok responding saying that I don't agree with this, but this is what I'm supposed to say, or ultimately then eventually leading to Grok at one point saying that he was Mecha Hitler. We've seen this, progression that is very concerning of a technology that, by being pushed to respond a certain way that is actually more biased, can actually end up being very harmful. So that is, that is kind of like an example of what this could look like, but it would be much more prevalent throughout and much more influential across more people, rather than just Twitter spats that lead to clickbait articles.
Another thing I noted in the AI action plan was the focus on open source AI. And that kind of took me by surprise, because open source is an area where China is having the lead over the US, at least last time I checked. I have my own thoughts about it, but why do you think that this was such a high priority on the AI action plan? As I remember, it was in the beginning of the document.
I mean, I think it might go back to the competing with China a bit, and seeing that China is doing something that has led them to further promulgate their own models. And I know that there is kind of a disagreement within the broader technological community and AI developers on the pros and cons of open source, and also in terms of national security concerns of this technology. But I think it's just this broader seeking broader influence is probably what's underpinning that. Um, but yeah, I mean, we saw that OpenAI just released open source models. I don't know if it was today or yesterday, but this week. So we're starting to see the effects of that. I'm sure that even though I think some of these companies at some point were maybe more reluctant to this, I think conversations that they had with the administration probably, either made them agree or just like made them like, hey, if these are the way that things are, then I'm going to take the lead in this. So yeah, that's we'll see. Also interested in hearing your perspective and any European perspectives on these issues as well.
Yeah, I'm only guessing. I don't know. I don't know, but there is something to be said about other countries might be more hesitant, at least in the longer term, not right now, but maybe in a few years, other countries would perhaps become more and more hesitant by using closed source AI. So I was thinking
Mhm.
that perhaps this focus on open source AI has something to do with contributing, uh, not contributing, distributing the American AI technologies to other countries around the world, for
Mhm.
instance, European countries. That was my initial thought. I'm not sure if there's anything to it, but as I see it, it could have something to do with control over their so-called allies.
For sure, for sure. And I mean that aligns very much with kind of their interest in, propagating US technology and becoming the dominant technology or like the dominant provider of AI technology.
Right. And I know there are many, people in Europe who take issue with that, because, of course, there's no way of denying that America produces the best AI models in the world at the moment. Europe is so far behind, and catching up is very, very difficult. We have Mistral. That's perhaps the only noteworthy player, but the development only goes one way, and it will be harder and harder to keep up with OpenAI, Anthropic, Google Meta, and so forth. So what are we going to do in Europe? I think personally we need to take a completely different approach to AI. I think we need to use it in a very targeted and limited way. General purpose AI models are not going to be our thing. We don't have the
Mhm.
venture capital industry for it. Our laws are too restrictive. We are just not geared to do the same thing as the United States are doing. And there are risks for the EU to adopt American technologies because, as we also talked about earlier, there's a lot of political influence. The freedom of speech thing is a perfect example. Like, we want our AI models to be free of bias, but what does that mean? It means nothing. Like, anti-woke, that can be whatever you disagree with. That's also what you said. So yeah, it's very complicated issue, right? But the bottom line is that Europe needs to think differently than the US, and we can't afford to depend so much on the American technology. What if Trump suddenly tells Microsoft to close some cloud servers? That's suddenly something we have realized in Europe. Our education system, our health system, all our like critical infrastructure depends on American cloud companies. It's quite incredible to think about, that no one has stopped for a second and thought, maybe we should try to develop our own thing. But I suppose it's because that Europe's and the United States relationship has been so good for so many years. The European Union was in part an American initiative, so we have basically been like one, and now we are unfortunately going more and more in each our direction. And yeah, it's really sad, and it's a difficult situation, but Europe definitely needs to step up its game, and I hope that you know, yeah, I can't really speak here on behalf of the US. That's why I brought you in. What do you think in the big picture?
I mean, I think
What is the best hope for the United States right now?
I mean, just first reacting to what you said,
Yeah,
it
please.
align everything you said aligns a lot with one of the main criticisms that people have had towards the AI action plan is that it's very focused on US dominance and all the like the whole there doesn't seem to be a lot of room for allyship and partnerships in it. And the main criticism, especially coming from the Biden administration, that really emphasized alliances and rekindling and strengthening, especially the transatlantic alliance. Um, there is a sense that there's going to be a backlash to that, and that this is actually going to make us more isolated by just trying to take over all the space and not being willing to collaborate and not being seen as a partner, but as someone who just wants to has a winner take all attitude. So hearing you express these concerns very much aligns with what the concerns were that about like how Europeans would respond to this. So it is unfortunate to hear you say this, but also not surprising given what the AI action plan brought up and how it was worded. And then you compare that to China's AI plan that came out just a few days after Trump's did. And that one was much more, willing to, or just at least in terms of rhetoric, much more open to collaboration and, thinking about like world like more global types of inputs, even though it might still be rhetorical, but not having that like aggressive, like dominant rhetoric and like showcasing themselves as an alternative in this case was very smart of them because the whole idea is to like pick up all the places that have been alienated by the US through these various mishaps. Well, I consider them to be mishaps because I think our strongest the US's strongest like asset was really and is really our alliances, and that's something that, for instance, if you're thinking of competition with China does not have and does not manage alliances. It manages its relationships with countries very differently, and so
Mm.
by losing this main asset and then just isolating ourselves, but while also seeking some sort of global domination on technology, it doesn't make sense. You can't have your cake and eat it too. At the end of the day, we share a world, and there are a lot of different interests. And if you're not seen as someone who's willing to collaborate, you're like people will take you. They'll tolerate you up to a certain extent, but it's not a good even like medium to long term tactic. Um, but yeah, so those are things that your comments made me think. And in terms of, I mean, the future, what this means for the Trump administration, I mean, it's not very kind of. I mean, the whole like idea of and the main tenets of this AI action plan are not particularly surprising. They very much align with um, with what this administration has been saying. And the areas where it's contradictory are only going to hamper the development of AI. That said, one thing that was notable about this action plan that wasn't necessarily a given was um, how much it really emphasized the whole supply chain, the whole stack of AI development, and really like elaborated on each part and how each part works together to be strengthened and to develop the technology. And I think that's something that is notable and like did show um, a lot more thought and strategy in comparison. So that could be something where you do see a potential for even more growth of AI technology in these companies. But it's without the regulations, it could also come as at a cost. And with um, with all these pressures to develop technology very quickly, we might end up with technology that's not necessarily good. In the worst case scenario, you have the people who think of like an evil AGI or super intelligence that's like around the corner. I haven't been convinced by those arguments. That doesn't mean they're not real. I'm also not an engineer, so there's just things that I'm not privy to. I don't understand. So I think it's good to understand all of those perspectives. But I think the most likely scenario that we have with AI development that is harmful is that we're going to have technologies that are ineffective, that are overhyped, that are not implemented or not actually applicable or the right fit for the problems that they're supposedly trying to resolve. And through that, ending up with a lot of harm. So you'll end up with a lot of people who might be fired when actually AI can't replace them. You might end up with a lot of really bad decisions being made because AI cannot process that information correctly and does not understand that context. You might end up with an AI that just makes a lot of mistakes or is not secure. So I think in terms of just the broader AI development, this strategy further pushes us towards that type of world. But we'll see. The interesting thing about AI is that it does develop very quickly, and there's always a lot going on in the news. And although there is a lot of noise, there's also a lot of new things coming out of it. So it'll be interesting to see how it develops in conjunction with like where this administration goes in the next few years, and also how this administration uses it. Um, and yeah, so we'll see. And I guess another thing that's related to that I didn't really talk about yet, but I do want to mention is we are also seeing that a lot of these AI companies are getting really big government contracts, and I don't think that's like necessarily a bad thing. Again, I think it's really about the details, like how they're being used. What does the implementation look like? Do they have someone who's there to actually help localize the technology, who's there in case there's any issues with the technology, someone who's really embedded and can really understand the logic of the agencies and the issues that are trying to be resolved. Those are the key details that are going to be important to see whether these are effective, whether these are like technologies that are helpful, or if they further problematic issues in this administration. So, they could also just further surveillance. There's a lot of discussion on that. But we just have to keep an eye out and look for the details of like how these technologies are actually used. Because so far, a lot of the AI that I've seen either like getting contracts or just like that I saw when I was in government, it's not always clear like what it's for or how it's being used, and sometimes they're figuring that out as they're using it. Like that was kind of the case with the LLM at the State Department. They're like figuring out how can this be most useful and that's a totally fine thing. It was like we were in a pilot program, so that was a good use for it. But because we are still there, like we don't know where that's going to evolve. And so it's just like keeping an eye out on like how these technologies evolve, how they're used, what follow-up there is, and how they apply to the existing workflows. So we'll see. There's you just gotta keep an eye out. Gotta see what happens.
Well, Thank you very much for your time. It was great to hear you had a very measured and balanced approach to these issues, and that's what we need right now. So all of us. So it was great talking with you.
Likewise, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Futuristic Lawyer Podcast.